Hopefully in the general too. Couple of different things. I think it is obvious that the office has been misused, abused, and not used for the good purposes that it should be devoted to. And that's just kind of the very specific state of the office here in Texas right now, big motivating factor. But also I think we're seeing in the state and in the nation the destabilization and really kind of the crumbling of some foundational principles that our state stands upon, that the federal government stands upon. And I'm talking about basic constitutional principles as to separation of powers and the executive staying in the executive lane and the legislature staying in its lane and the judiciary actually having a function. And I think the Attorney General stands at the intersection of all these powers. So in addition to it not being used for the daily functions, protecting markets, protecting people from crime and from political corruption, in addition to it being abused, we are at kind of a crisis point in our political culture right now, and we're undergoing a change. That's important, it needs to happen, but somebody's got to hold the roof up during all of this. And I think we need a good independent-minded AG in office to make sure that we work our way through this time. Yeah, I think it was beyond a decision to not fight. I think that was an outright act of collusion. I think it was a subversion of democracy, and I'm talking about the will of the voters as expressed through the Texas legislature. Ken Paxton went in there, colluded with the federal government, Donald Trump obviously, to get rid of a program that was signed by a Republican governor and passed by a Republican legislature 24 years ago. And every session since then was reaffirmed by a Republican legislature in the face of attempts to tear it down. Why? Because it serves Texas well. These are kids who've been here mostly their whole lives. They've gotten good grades. They qualified to go into college. They want to become educated participants in our society, and we've paid to educate them already. So it's a good thing to do for these kids. It's a good thing to do for our economy, and the legislature has seen fit. Along comes Ken Paxton, handpicks a judge that does what he's told. Paxton does what he's told by Washington, and they wipe it out in 6 hours. It was absolutely subversive. You know, law school, and to a much greater extent, the legal practice, teaches you a way to think, to kind of take a step back, examine facts, examine laws, try to keep your own biases in check, and see what the right answer is, and then assess the whole strategic landscape. How do I get this done? What's the method? Who do I need along with me en road to achieving things? What are my obstacles? And so legal training really alerts you to what ought to be done and how to get there. I appreciate the word radioactivity. It's a little more highly charged than I would use, but people do sometimes feel that way, particularly when it comes to pessimism. You know, when I ran to be a state senator in 2018, no one had won that, no Democrat had won that seat in over 30 years. And people thought it was absolutely nuts to try. Well, we won it by 8 points, right? When there's something in the air, when there's a need for change and a possibility for change, change tends to happen. Whether you're a Republican running in a Democratic state or a Democrat running in a long-dominated Republican state, there are changes afoot. And I do think there's a way to win this election. And I think that between swings in national mood, between the stain that Ken Paxton has left on the office, between the complicity of everybody around him and going along with it, I think people are really, really yearning for an independent mind to get in there and restore the integrity of the Attorney General's office, restore its function, and leave people with the genuine sense that there is someone in that office who cares about them and their future. And they don't have it right now. And I think more than party identity, that is going to ring with voters. I really do. Not that infrequent either, but Yeah, for context, there have been a variety of property tax relief packages, and I've voted for all of them until the last one, right? We had already voted to raise the homestead exemption another $40,000 or $50,000. And late in the process, a month after the deadline to even file a bill was filed, rules suspended to pass an additional property tax homestead exemption for people aged 65 and over. It cost $1.2 billion out of the blue in a session when everyone's like, oh no, we're out of money, we can't do anything useful. So we're going to yet give away $1.2 billion to people over age 65 to essentially double their homestead exemption. And while I'm all for people getting tax relief, I love tax breaks. People over 65 have their property valuations frozen at 65. By law, they never ever have to pay their property taxes again because they can be deferred. No one else can defer their taxes forever. So they're not being taxed out of their homes. And only a third of them are really struggling to get by on their housing expenses. When you look across the whole spectrum, you're literally redistributing money. You're taking money from low income working families struggling to pay their rent and giving it, in many cases, 2/3 of the cases, to retirees who have expensive homes. I guarantee you, if you were to present those facts to people over 65, they would say, you know what, I don't want it. I want some kid to have a good education, and I want everyone to have health care. Keep it. And yet we didn't do that. It was a big populist movement, and I just couldn't stomach it.
So you mentioned the role of the Attorney General right now. A lot of the things that we see, press releases from that office, or on some of the culture war issues, some of the possible voter fraud issues. What kind of issues would you be trying to tackle in that role?
I would be tackling things that people should be counting or that the Attorney General should be doing. There's some basics. Collecting child support. Literally half of the Attorney General's personnel is devoted to child support. I want to make sure those things function as they should routinely. You need to be protecting people from crime. That's probably going to mean working with DAs around the state. You need to protect them from market abuse, scams, price gouging, just generally being taken advantage of. And you need to protect people from policy that's being driven by political corruption. So instead of filing a lawsuit every 5 minutes against a company and then settling really quickly, to kind of sue and settle, get a headline, take a pittance, everybody moves on. Instead of filing some big culture war issue every time there's a negative headline that makes you or your party look bad, which we're also seeing, I would be going after antitrust, Medicaid fraud, abuse of political power, those kinds of things. And part of that is a process of being in the office and working with good attorneys on your staff to develop a set of priorities. But you've got to start out with the right goals, which is it's a protective office. The Attorney General is the lawyer for the people and for the state. And that's not how it's been used. It's been used essentially as a party tool. Ken Paxton has turned that office into a tool for the far right, and I think that certainly people on the left, I think that people in the moderate right and independents have just really grown disillusioned with that office. I think it's significant to note that the two legitimate things that we should be here talking about are THC. That's got to be addressed. It's too big of an issue to kind of leave simmering, and the flood relief. I mean, we've got to do something there that hasn't been done. The rest of this stuff, at best, are things that failed in the legislative session, like things do, and you come back and do the next session. I think the governor is abusing again. He's abusing the legislative branch of government. He's abusing his prerogative to call special sessions just to get his way, just to make his little partisan favor points. I find that really, really disappointing. And I think it should discourage voters as far as their faith in people doing their jobs. What's completely illegitimate is this redistricting garbage. I find that offensive. I find it un-American, anti-democratic. What would any of these people say if President Kamala Harris or President Joe Biden said to New York, I need you to draw your maps up so we can get more Democratic seats, they would revolt. And yet, here we are wanting to drop more seats. And it's really just a way for them to insulate themselves from the wrath of the voters for having done a bad job. That's really, really bad. I can't believe we're having a special session over that. What are my goals? I hope we get a nice, solid, thoughtful, protective regulatory regime for THC, which I will be advocating for during the session. I hope we figure out what we need to do in emergency services, whether it's floods or fires or anything else. We need to do a better job of protecting people, clearly. I hope a lot of these garbage bills that died during the regular session die again, and that the governor doesn't keep calling us back. And Adam, one of the harms of having special sessions, particularly when we don't need them, is that it deprives the legislators and everybody who works with legislators of the interim. And the interim is supposed to be a calm, thoughtful period without flash bulbs and big political conferences and things, where we talk to constituents and professors and experts and advocates and activists and everybody across the spectrum to figure out what needs to be done in Texas, and I'm going to get ready for it and bring it the next session. What's simmering? You look back and say, what did we do well and what did we do poorly? And you reflect and you get into the next session ready to go, because it's pretty short, and then you can have a good session. But when the governor's calling us back special session after special session after special session, we basically wind up with a big bloody primary election and then straight into the next year. We lose the advantage of the interim. If we wanted to have a year-round legislature, that's what we would have, but we don't. I think the national perspective is that Texas is in many ways a lost cause, and that it will forever be dominated by one particular set of viewpoints. I think it's healthy that we have differing viewpoints in this state. I'd like mine to prevail more often, but notably that is not really part of the AG's function. I think there's a much stronger set of voices that aren't being heard in Texas than the rest of the nation realizes. And I think they're going to hear those voices very soon. Thank you, Adam. Great to talk to you.